When I knocked on my millionaire daughter's door, another woman opened it, wearing my memories like a costume. I clutched the orange tulips tighter, their stems already wilting from my nervous sweat. 23 years since Emily walked out of our cramped apartment, promising she'd be somebody important someday. Standing outside her mansion now, I could smell her vanilla perfume, the same scent from her teenage years when she dreamed of escape. Emily had become everything she promised. Forbes magazine called her a self-made millionaire. Talk shows praised her inspirational story about overcoming poverty with a loving mother's support. I'd watched every interview from my tiny living room, tears streaming down my face because she never mentioned my name. Something here felt staged, like I had walked onto a set. That's when I heard my own laugh echoing from inside the house. The doorbell chimed like church bells. My heart hammered as footsteps approached. Through the frosted glass, I saw a figure moving toward me. For a moment, I felt 7 years old again, waiting for Emily to come home from school so we could tend our pathetic little tulip garden together. The door opened, and Emily stood there in designer clothes that cost more than I made in a year, but her eyes held no recognition, like looking at a stranger wearing my daughter's face. Not shocked, not angry, not even curious. She looked at me like I was selling magazines door to door. Her diamond earrings caught the afternoon light. Her manicured hands gripped the doorframe. This was my baby girl, the one who used to fall asleep in my arms after nightmares. But she was staring at me like we'd never met. I lifted the tulips with shaking hands. "Emily," I whispered, "I'm your mother." Her face remained blank as marble. She studied the flowers, then glanced nervously over her shoulder. Voices echoed from inside the house. Camera equipment. She was filming something. I wasn't the audience they expected, but what I saw next shattered 23 years of motherhood in a single glance. Emily invited me in with polite detachment, like I was an unexpected delivery she had to deal with quickly. The house was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens that would have made 7-year-old Emily weep with joy. The more I looked, the less I recognized her life, or mine. A camera crew was setting up in the living room. Soft lighting, expensive cameras, the kind of production that screamed prestige. Emily was doing an intimate interview about her journey from poverty to success, about family, about sacrifice, about love. The interviewer, a kind-faced woman with gentle eyes, started asking about Emily's childhood, about the mother who worked 3 jobs to keep dreams alive, about cracked hands from cleaning offices, about falling asleep over bills that never balanced. Emily's answers were perfect, every word true, every detail mine. She spoke about coming home to find her mother collapsed at the kitchen table, exhausted from 18-hour days, about tulip seeds planted in coffee cans because we couldn't afford proper pots, about bedtime stories where brave girls saved themselves because no prince was coming. But she wasn't looking at me when she said these things. A single detail ruined the whole picture. An older woman sat beside Emily on the velvet sofa, nodding with practiced emotion. Perfectly styled gray hair, expensive but modest clothes, hands that looked worked raw and tired. She had the exact weathered appearance Emily was describing, down to the small scar on her thumb from a childhood accident. Except that scar was mine, and this woman wasn't. That's when I realized how deep this betrayal went. This stranger was holding Emily's hand, playing the part of the sacrificing mother with Oscar-worthy skill. She knew intimate details that only I should know. The way Emily hummed while studying, her fear of thunderstorms until age 9, the poem she wrote me for Mother's Day in crayon, promising she'd buy me a mansion someday. My chest compressed like a fist, squeezing my lungs. I stood frozen in the archway, hands trembling as I watched someone else receive credit for 23 years of my life. The tulips slipped from my numb fingers, orange petals scattering across the marble like drops of blood. The cameras rolled as Emily hugged this imposter, thanking her for sacrifices that had carved lines in my face and arthritis in my joints. The interviewer wiped away tears at their reunion. The crew captured every tender moment between my daughter and the woman she'd hired to replace me. My throat closed completely. Each breath came in sharp, shallow gasps as my lungs felt crushed. This wasn't just replacement, this was erasure. Emily had surgically removed me from her story and stitched in someone more palatable, someone whose poverty looked elegant instead of desperate. I slipped out like a ghost, leaving the tulips scattered behind me. But the questions followed me home. How long had this been going on? How many interviews had this woman given as Emily's mother? How many people believed she was the one who'd pawned her wedding ring to buy Emily's first laptop? The private investigator I hired worked fast. The actress was named Margaret Chen, 58, specializing in narrative enhancement for wealthy clients. She'd been playing Emily's mother for 8 months, appearing at charity events, giving interviews, even meeting with publishers about Emily's upcoming memoir. But there was more. Emily wasn't just hiring her for appearances. She was creating an entire mythology, digitally altered photos showing Margaret at Emily's childhood birthday parties, fake school records listing Margaret as Emily's emergency contact, even a fabricated backstory about Margaret's immigrant parents, designed to make Emily's rise even more inspiring. The envelope I found changed everything I thought I knew. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, handed it to me with trembling fingers. Someone had dropped it at her door by mistake. My address written in Emily's unmistakable handwriting. Inside were contracts, payment schedules, instructions so detailed they made my stomach turn. Emily hadn't just hired an actress. She'd hired someone to study me like a role. Margaret had received videos of my mannerisms, recordings of my voice, even medical records detailing the arthritis in my hands from years of cleaning jobs. Emily had fed her every detail of our real relationship, then coached her to perform a sanitized version. Proof was closing in. I just hadn't opened it yet. The cruelest part was the money. Emily was paying Margaret more per month than I'd ever made in a year. More than enough to erase any guilt about stealing someone else's story. But that wasn't the worst discovery. At the bottom of the contract was a clause that made my blood freeze. If anyone ever questioned Margaret's authenticity, Emily had a plan. A psychiatric evaluation she'd commissioned, painting me as delusional, unstable, possibly dangerous. If I ever tried to expose the truth, she had paperwork ready to destroy my credibility completely. My own daughter had prepared to have me declared insane rather than admit I existed. That night, I sat in my kitchen staring at those contracts until the words blurred together. My hands shook so violently I had to set down my coffee cup before it shattered against the table. 23 years of sacrifice, and this was how it ended. Not with anger or disappointment, but with surgical precision. Emily had found a way to keep the benefits of having a struggling mother without the embarrassment of having me. I thought about 7-year-old Emily, sobbing in my arms because kids at school made fun of her thrift store clothes. How I'd held her tight and promised that someday none of this would matter. How I'd worked night shifts so she could take piano lessons. How I'd skipped meals so she could eat lunch with her friends instead of the free school program. She'd kept her promise to become somebody important. She'd just decided I wasn't worthy of coming along for the celebration. The next morning, I called the investigative reporter from Channel 7, not because I wanted revenge, but because truth has weight. When someone builds an empire on lies, the foundation eventually cracks. I brought the contracts, the photos, Emily's childhood letters where she signed them, "Your loving daughter," before fame taught her to be ashamed of where she came from. I brought the Mother's Day poem written in purple crayon, the one where she promised to plant me a garden of real tulips someday. The story aired on a Wednesday evening. I watched from my couch as the reporter laid out the evidence with surgical precision. The forged documents, Margaret's other clients, the psychiatric evaluation Emily had commissioned as insurance against me. But the detail that made viewers gasp was simple. In every childhood photo Emily had digitally altered to include Margaret, there was a small orange tulip visible somewhere in the frame. Her subconscious signature, maybe. Or perhaps some buried guilt about erasing the woman who'd taught her that flowers could grow in coffee cans if you loved them enough. What happened next will haunt me forever. Emily's world collapsed in real time. Social media exploded with fury about authenticity and truth. Her book deal vanished. Speaking engagements canceled. The charity that had planned to honor her quietly removed her name from their gala. But Emily didn't call to apologize. Every answer I found pulled up another route. She called to blame me for destroying her life. Her voice was shaking with rage, not remorse. I'd ruined everything, she said. I was jealous of her success. I was trying to steal credit for her hard work. Then she said the words that broke something in me permanently. If I'd been a better mother, she wouldn't have needed to hire someone to play the part. Margaret contacted me a week later. She wanted to return something that belonged to me. The orange tulip Emily had given her to wear during interviews. A real one, preserved between glass, that Emily said represented her mother's love. She'd never mentioned it was my tulip from our last garden together, the one Emily had picked before leaving for college, the one I'd pressed in her baby book, thinking someday she might want it back. Margaret apologized with tears in her eyes. She'd thought she was just helping someone tell their story more effectively. She hadn't realized she was erasing someone real, someone who'd sacrificed everything to create the success story Emily was now monetizing. I planted new tulips that spring, orange ones that bloomed bright and defiant in the patch of earth outside my apartment. Real flowers with real roots, not preserved glass memories of what used to be. Emily's empire crumbled completely when investigators found other lies. Tax evasion, employee mistreatment, the kind of ethical violations that happen when someone builds their life on the foundation that truth is negotiable. She called one last time on a rainy Thursday when my tulips were showing their first green shoots. She was crying, genuine tears this time, not the practiced emotion she'd perfected for cameras. Everything was gone. Her money, her reputation, her friends. She had nowhere left to go. She asked if she could come home. I looked out at the tulips pushing through the soil with stubborn hope. I didn't need a witness, only courage. I thought about 7-year-old Emily, planting seeds in coffee cans and believing in impossible gardens. I thought about the daughter who'd held my hand during thunderstorms versus the woman who'd hired someone to play my role because I wasn't good enough for her brand. Then I told her the truth she'd been running from for 23 years. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Some distances, once chosen, become permanent. Some mothers, once erased, learn to bloom without the children who tried to bury them. I wished her well. I meant it. But I didn't open my door. The tulips bloomed orange and bright that spring, just like the ones we'd planted when she was small and still believed love was spelled T-I-M-E. They were beautiful and real, and entirely mine, growing in soil that knew the truth about what it takes to nurture something from seed to flower. 3 months later, the envelope arrived with no return address, but I recognized Emily's handwriting immediately. Inside was a single sentence that changed everything. Margaret wasn't the first actress she'd hired. I was never her real mother either. If truth cuts this deep, would you open the door or keep your peace?